I remember my ex kept calling me while I was at work. And I was like, look, you're going to have to stop calling me because I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to lose my job. And he was like, if you don't talk to me, I'm coming up there. Well, I don't want him coming up there. Like, I already know it's going to be worse if he comes up here. So every time this would happen, he would call, you need to come outside and talk to me, because he would come up there. And I would go outside and I would talk to him because I don't want him trying to come into my place of employment and cause all these problems, right? When somebody keeps doing that, they have no regard for your sense of safety, financial safety, about your employment. And the thing is, I did get fired, and I was about 8 months pregnant at the time. Now, he had no regard for my job, and he didn't have one. Isn't it funny how that happens? They want to control your assets when they don't have any money themselves. But he wasn't all that upset about me losing my job because he wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom anyway. But you ain't working. That math ain't never been mathing. So when people are trying to keep you from working, or they're trying to interfere with your job so that you lose your job, or they try to keep you from going to school or getting some type of certification or getting a trade, bettering yourself in some way that's going to make you financially independent, that is an abuser. That is somebody who is using finances to be able to control what you do and to keep you dependent on them. Again, even if you're the one that's making the money, if they're controlling it or if they're constantly accessing it, if they are taking the money and that they make and spend it on what they want, and you're forced to spend all of your money on bills, you don't have any way to save. You don't have any assets to be able to put it away to be able to get out of that situation. It's not a coincidence that over 90% of domestic violence cases involve some form of financial abuse. So, has your partner ever refused to work? Or maybe they work, but they refuse to help pay the bills. Therefore, all of your money goes towards the household expenses, the bills, the things for the kids. Meanwhile, their money goes towards whatever they want to spend it on. Did you know that those are forms of financial abuse? Welcome to the Empowered and in Control podcast, the podcast that helps people who have been impacted by domestic abuse to heal and regain power and control after an abusive relationship. I'm your host, Oriana, your favorite domestic violence expert, speaker, and the owner of To Rise Advocacy and Consulting. Today, I wanted to talk about financial abuse. Most households require two incomes just to be able to pay the bills, gas, rent or mortgage, and groceries. So for those who have recently left an abusive relationship, they're often working two jobs or more just to avoid having to go back to an abuser that they may have been dependent on. Financial abuse is one of the primary reasons that survivors stay or return, especially in this economy. So I felt it was important to talk about financial abuse and coercion because people are having to make really hard decisions right now. And if you're one of the over 300,000 Black women who were either fired or exited the workforce in 2025, maybe you started a business or maybe you're still struggling to find employment. I just know how hard it is to try to get back on your feet. And the last thing you need is for your ex to come right back in trying to play savior. You know how exes tend to show up when you're doing really well, when you've moved on, that kind of thing, right? Well, they can also make the grandest of entrances when they smell blood in the water, when they feel like you're struggling or get wind of the fact that you're having a hard time making ends meet. then all of a sudden they want to come and pretend to be who they were in the beginning of the relationship, right? Sometimes they want to show up and say that they can help you with the bills. Just move back in. We can share the bills, right? We would be helping each other out. But I think we both know better, right? So let's talk about the problem with that and what financial abuse actually entails. Because I'm not here to tell you what to do or to judge any decision that you make one way or the other. I just want to make sure that we identify the problems and give you some information that makes sure that your decision is informed by resources and access. Okay? So, what does financial abuse look like? It can be controlling access to money, fostering dependency, like forcing someone to be dependent on them. It can be ruining your credit, and that happens a lot when it comes to renting apartments, right? Those things go on your credit when there's an eviction because it's your name on the lease. It could also be financial surveillance, so keeping track of how much you're spending, what is in the account, how often you're using the account. Those are all types of financial abuse. But how about this one? Not only keeping you from working, but what if they just keep coming up to your job? Hey, the Empowered and in Control Wheel and its guide is a hopeful tool that I developed for people who are impacted by domestic abuse. It's a healing-centered tool that creates a pattern of positive behaviors that people can use to regain power and control after an abusive relationship. Click the link in the description to get your copy for yourself or for someone that you know who is struggling to move forward after the trauma of an abusive relationship. You can be empowered and in control again. Bye. I remember my ex kept calling me while I was at work. And I was like, look, you're going to have to stop calling me because I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to lose my job. And he was like, if you don't talk to me, I'm coming up there. Well, I don't want him coming up there. Like, I already know it's going to be worse if he comes up here. So every time this would happen, he would call, you need to come outside and talk to me, because he would come up there. And I would go outside and I would talk to him because I don't want him trying to come into my place of employment and cause all these problems, right? When somebody keeps doing that, they have no regard for your sense of safety, financial safety, about your employment. And the thing is, I did get fired, and I was about 8 months pregnant at the time. Now, he had no regard for my job, and he didn't have one. Isn't it funny how that happens? They want to control your assets when they don't have any money themselves. But he wasn't all that upset about me losing my job because he wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom anyway. But you ain't working. That math ain't never been mathing. So when people are trying to keep you from working, or they're trying to interfere with your job so that you lose your job, or they try to keep you from going to school or getting some type of certification or getting a trade, bettering yourself in some way that's going to make you financially independent, that is an abuser. That is somebody who is using finances to be able to control what you do and to keep you dependent on them. Again, even if you're the one that's making the money, if they're controlling it or if they're constantly accessing it, if they are taking the money and that they make and spend it on what they want, and you're forced to spend all of your money on bills, you don't have any way to save. You don't have any assets to be able to put it away to be able to get out of that situation. It's not a coincidence that over 90% of domestic violence cases involve some form of financial abuse. So In a little bit, I'm going to share some tips and some ideas that can help you with your financial stability. Okay. So let's talk about when we leave. When we leave an abusive relationship and then we start struggling, sometimes the expectations that we had turn out to be a big disappointment, right? If we leave and then we start to struggle financially, we had these expectations of instant independence, right? And being able to um, just be able to recover quickly. But that doesn't always happen because we're being realistic. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. It takes time to get back to financial stability, but it is possible. And so we expect certain things when it comes to recovery and when it comes to independence, but we don't expect the grieving that takes place. Sometimes you're grieving not only the relationship, but you're grieving the loss of income, the lifestyle that you may have gotten used to. Sometimes it's the damaged credit that you have, you're grieving that, missed opportunities, things that you wish you would have done, but you didn't because you were kind of forced into this dependency. And so stability has to come before success, right? You have to look at what are some of the things that have to be in place. You have to have safe housing. Now, I don't know where you are, but in Memphis, Tennessee, finding safe housing is difficult. So I'm not going to sit here and make it sound like it's a cakewalk to try to find safe housing, especially depending on your income. Now, there are resources that can help with that. If you're in a situation where you need to get out of that household, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. But safe housing is something that is stability that has to happen before some of the others, right? You think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are certain basic things that people need before they can build on it. And so safe housing is one of those things, along with food and, you know, security and things like that. Stability also requires predictable expenses. You have to be able to um, know what your expenses are going to be and make sure that they're reasonable expenses, right? Sometimes you're going to have to let some things go. Sometimes you have to move in with relatives. Hopefully, they are safe individuals. And if not, again, there are other ways that you can go about getting safe housing. And having consistent income is another way to get to stability. It may not be the income that you're looking for at the moment, but at least if it's consistent, you're able to budget with that. If you're just piecing together an income, which some people are doing, I've been doing it, you know, um, it can be difficult, but it's getting to a point where you're able to get consistent income coming in so that you can budget and become more stable and celebrate those wins when you have that, when you get a promotion at the job. So another thing that I want to point out is the importance of rebuilding financial trust in yourself. That's what I mean by celebrating the wins, right? Abuse damages your sense of self trust. So track your wins. Any repayment of debt, any credit cards that are paid off or paid down, any promotions that you get, any bonuses you receive, those are all wins. So make sure that you are celebrating those things as a reminder that your safety and your financial independence is more important. We also want to avoid urgency traps. And what do I mean by that? So sometimes rushing into new relationships can be an urgency trap. We feel like, we got out of this relationship and now there's this new person and everything's going really well. They want you to move in. You need some place to be. It sounds like it's going to work out. But rushing into that can be a problem. In another episode, I talked about power imbalance, right? And how sometimes our needs can trigger people who are abusive into giving you what you need so that they can have control, right? So if you are struggling financially and you are talking to somebody who has a lot of money, that's not necessarily something that says that you guys are compatible. That means that that's a risk that you'll have to assess whether or not this is the type of person who will exploit those needs that you have, or whether they're really wanting to help you. That's where discernment and trust building in yourself in general comes in, right? I'm not telling you not to, to get into a new relationship. I'm saying take your time. Stability takes time, and getting to know people and whether or not they're the types that will exploit your financial situation also takes time, because people make themselves look like whatever you want them to. Now, leaving an abusive relationship isn't just an emotional decision, often it's a financial one. So we have to think about some tips that can help you to safety plan ahead of time, right? Job placement. There are uh, domestic violence advocacy groups and shelters who partner with certain companies, certain other nonprofits that do job placement and career development that can potentially help you get a job. A lot of times you don't even have to be in a shelter to receive those services. So if you're having a hard time finding employment, you can access one of those avenues to try to get employment. Bartering services with other survivors. Look, that has been a godsend for me, even in this season, right? Abusive relationship aside, and I haven't been in one in a long time. When your financial situation changes, sometimes you have to be creative. And so, what I've seen a lot of people do in this space and in this season is bartering services. It's been fantastic to network with other women who may be in the same situation, so we can relate to the fact that, yeah, I just got fired, or I just left the workforce and I'm trying to make ends meet, because trying to go back into the workforce is either difficult or not an option at this point. And so sometimes I'm seeing people say, okay, if you'll do my social media for me, then I'll do the, writing, copywriting for you. Or even if it's not something that's business related, I've seen people say, hey, if you'll do my nails, I'll do your hair, right? Sometimes we can get some of the things that we need and want, because contrary to what some systems will tell you, having your hair and your nails done isn't necessarily a luxury. When you look good, you feel good. That's accurate. And also, when you're going to present yourself for employment, there are certain ways that they recommend that you dress and all that, right? That's a whole nother issue that we could talk about. But just remember that getting your hair done is not a bad thing. Getting your nails done is not a bad thing, especially if you're bartering those services. If you didn't have to pay for it, and whose business is it anyway of what you're doing? So that's one thing that I would highly recommend is bartering. And I highly recommend you do that with other people that are kind of in your same situation, so that there's not an imbalance of power there, right? It's not somebody who has all of these resources. And if they want to help you, great. But again, when it's people who are kind of in your same situation, been through what you've been through, they get it. And a lot of times they're wanting to help you, and they need the help as well. Thank you so much for watching the Empowered and in Control podcast. Hey, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When people recommended it to me, I had no idea where to start. I didn't know anything about podcasting. And then I saw the ads for My Seven Figure podcast. Now, seven figures did pique my interest, but I had no idea how people were making money podcasting. What really got me was the idea of being able to help so many more people through a podcast. So I signed up for the course and the community. It is so thorough, let me tell you. From branding to making sure that it's legally protected to monetizing, they left no guesswork and no excuses. So click the link in the description to sign up for My Seven Figure Podcast course and invest in your future. There are podcasts about everything, but there are certain things that people only want to hear from you. So get started today. People need to hear your voice. Passive income is another thing that you can take into consideration. So for people who are skilled or trained in something that you're really good at, that you're able to teach, right? Not everybody's good at teaching, but if you do have that skill and that talent to be able to teach people how to do what you know how to do well, that's something that can become passive income. You can either write a book, and it doesn't have to be about your abusive relationship, right? Sometimes that can be a hard thing to translate into a book or into video, because once it's out there, it's out there. So if you do decide to do that about your experience, I just caution that you make sure you're ready, right? Do the healing portion before you do that. But if it's not about your abusive relationship or the experiences that you have had that are traumatic, it could be writing a book about whatever it is that you're good at, right? You write that book, have it published, and then put it on a website, whether it's your own or whether it's sold through Barnes and Noble or other sites where that's passive income. Every time someone buys your book, that's income coming into you, but the work's already been done. You wrote the book once, you published it, and now that money is coming into you. Another way that you can do that is recording a course. So if you're able to record yourself showing people how to do something, the work's been done. But if you put that online, which I highly recommend getting your information copyrighted, protect your intellectual property by all means. But once you record that course and you put it on whatever site, Udemy, Teachable, there are sites that you can put your content on, teaching people how to do things. And when people access that and pay for that class, that's again passive income coming in. The work's already been done. You don't even have to do anything extra, right? Especially if it's digital products, ebooks, things like that. No shipping needed. So if you have a business, affiliate marketing is a good way to get passive income as well. And this is one of my favorite ways, and for the mentors that I work with, they also talk about how great affiliate marketing is, because it's not the same as sponsorship. The sponsorship, it's a give and take, right? They're going to give you this much money and you have to market their products and services in the way that you guys have agreed to, right? You've laid out that I'm going to promote your product on my podcast or through my shop or whatever that is for this amount of time and this number of times during a segment. And so a sponsorship usually requires that the person who is sponsoring knows about your audience and is trying to tap into that audience that you have or those customers that you have. But with affiliate marketing, it's different. No harm, no foul. If you say you have a product or service that I would like to promote and I would like to negotiate a percentage of the amount that you get from my customers, it's a win-win because they're not putting out any money on the front end in the hopes that you're going to be successful and bring in this money for them. It is that they already have this product or service, and I highly recommend that it is a product that is already complete, not a service that they're going to have to do every single time, right? So think of, again, online courses. or a book or something like that. Something that's potentially a high ticket item, like a course, that you say, okay, for every course that's sold through my podcast or through my store, online store, I want, 50% of your profit because I'm doing the marketing for you, right? I'm on my podcast and I'm talking about your product, and then my customers buy your product. I want 50% of those sales. You work that out, they give you a promo code. Maybe your customers get a percentage off, for participating, right? For watching the show and signing up to get the product. But that's passive income every time with that promo code and that purchase. Every time one of your listeners, audience members, customers buys that product, you get money coming in from that. Again, the work's already been done. So I wanted to mention those things to you. There are a few other things that I want to talk about real quick. There's criminal injuries compensation, and that's something that I'm going to discuss on another, in another platform in another way. But just so you know, if you are a victim of a crime, of an eligible crime, which there's a list of them, then you, once approved, once your application is approved, you can get reimbursement for moving expenses, reimbursement for counseling, lost wages, things like that. A lot of people don't know that. And so that's something that you may want to look into. If you have left an abusive relationship and you are looking to recoup some of the losses that you've had, then that may be one way to do it. I would highly suggest that you contact an advocate from one of those domestic violence agencies or shelters so that they can help you with that process of filing for criminal injuries compensation. It does require that a police report was filed, and it also requires that you're participating in prosecution. Now there are some exceptions to that, but again, an advocate would be able to walk you through that. Also, when it comes to creditors, your credit cards and other creditors that you owe money to, if you're comfortable with it, you might want to let them know what the circumstances were that led to all this debt. Sometimes there are certain creditors who have special circumstances for domestic violence victims, things like that. And sometimes they will work with you a little bit more. They'll be a little bit more lenient based on the fact that you were in this situation and potentially your information was being used fraudulently or you were coerced into it. So that's something that you can look into as well with your creditors, only if you're comfortable with it. And then the last tip is, Allstate insurance, and you'll want to check into this to make sure that they're still doing this program. But they had a Purple Purse program, and it was for domestic violence survivors who were trying to get back on their feet. It's a financial literacy class, but it also has a savings match. And so you go through the classes, and every time you put money in, they match it up to a certain amount. That's another way that you can kind of get a little bit of a head start on getting back to financial stability. Now, I'm hoping that some or any of this was helpful. And if you need more resources, more tactics based on what your current situation is, I encourage you to attend the Financial Safety Planning for Survivors webinar. And there's going to be a link that you can click in the description for an Eventbrite link to take you to that webinar. Sign up for that webinar and I will be able to give a little bit more information. There'll be a short time for Q&A. It's only a 30-minute webinar because I want to respect people's time, but I also want to make sure that I get a little bit deeper into some of the resources without doing it on this platform. So if that's something that you're interested in, click the link in the description to be able to sign up for the Financial Safety Planning for Survivors webinar. It's coming up really soon. And so I hope to see you there. Again, financial abuse is one of the most common reasons that people stay or that they return. And so I just wanted to talk about this topic so that you can think about this ahead of time before you even have to be put in a situation where you have to decide between going back or moving forward in struggle. Again, no judgment, but if you're able to think ahead and put certain things in place, then you might be more financially stable than you think, and you won't even have to consider going back. Okay? Again, I appreciate you watching the show. If this has been helpful to you or you think that somebody else might be able to use this information, by all means, share it with them. Subscribe to the podcast so that you can get weekly episodes about all of these things: empowerment coaching, domestic abuse education, and just tips on how to move forward after an abusive relationship. I'm your host, Oriana. Again, your favorite expert on domestic violence and speaker and owner of To Rise Advocacy and Consulting. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, loves.